Indeed, Vivienne. I have more than a question. I have a revelation. The air in that opulent ballroom was thick with a tension that only I seemed immune to. Vivienne, my former stepmother, stood on a makeshift stage, clutching a microphone, her voice carrying a triumphant, almost shrill quality. Her eyes, usually so sharp and calculating, were glazed with a self-satisfied glee as she addressed a small gathering of bewildered guests and a few stony-faced bankers. She was celebrating what she believed was her final victory, her escape from financial ruin. Her laughter echoed, hollow and brittle, as she toasted her future, completely oblivious to the fact that the carefully constructed edifice of her life was about to crumble around her. I stood at the very back, a quiet observer, a ghost at her feast. My presence was, to her, a mere formality, an irritating reminder of a past she thought she had long buried. She saw my stillness as defeat, my silence as resignation. She couldn't have been more wrong. My gaze wasn't fixed on her, but on the collection of Renaissance art adorning the walls, the very collection she had so ruthlessly claimed as her own, the very collection that held the key to her undoing. I knew its true secret, a truth she was blissfully unaware of, a truth that would ensure her grand celebration would swiftly morph into her final, agonizing downfall. The irony of it all was palpable, the anticipation exquisitely sweet. Every fiber of my being was calm, controlled, utterly confident. This wasn't merely about money. This was about justice, about reclaiming what was undeniably mine, and about a secret I had guarded for years, waiting for this precise moment to unleash its devastating power. To truly understand that moment, one must understand the decades of quiet cultivation that led to it. My childhood, after my mother passed away when I was very young, became a delicate, precarious dance around Vivienne. She entered my father's life like a vibrant, yet ultimately parasitic orchid. She was undeniably beautiful, charming, and utterly captivating to my grieving father, who, in his sorrow, saw in her a second chance at happiness. I, however, even as a child, saw through the polished veneer. I sensed the sharp, grasping edges beneath her captivating exterior. She coveted my father's wealth, his esteemed status, and eventually, even the most tangible symbols of his deep affection, like our ancestral home and his prized art collection. It was a collection he had painstakingly built, piece by piece, not for monetary value alone, but for the stories they told, the rich history they represented, and the profound lessons they imparted. My father was a man of quiet passions, and his art was one of them. He often spoke to me about the pieces, sharing anecdotes, teaching me about brushstrokes and patronage, about the artists and their world. He taught me to truly see art, not just to look at it as a decorative object. When my father passed suddenly, the world tilted violently on its axis. Grieving and vulnerable, barely 20 years old and fresh out of college, I watched in helpless horror as Vivienne's true colors unfurled with brutal speed. Within months, fueled by a cleverly manipulated will and a formidable team of ruthless lawyers, she systematically stripped me of everything. The family home, a place of cherished memories and childhood laughter, became legally hers. My father's personal effects, his worn armchairs, his beloved books, every single piece of his cherished art, all were legally transferred to her name. She delivered the final, crushing blow herself, an eviction notice. I stood in the grand foyer of the home I had grown up in, its grandeur now mocking my despair, watching me pack a single suitcase with the few belongings I had left. "You have nothing now, Kaelen," she had purred, a cruel smirk playing on her lips, her eyes glinting with malicious triumph. "Except the clothes on your back. This is my house now and my inheritance. A clean break is truly for the best, don't you think?" The venom in her words was undeniable, a cold, calculated cruelty that pierced my heart. Kicked out, disinherited, and utterly alone, standing on a desolate street with nowhere to go, I had two stark choices: crumble under the weight of injustice, or rise and build something unassailable. I chose the latter. I started from scratch with nothing but a fierce, burning determination forged in the fires of betrayal and an insatiable hunger for knowledge. I poured myself into the world of real estate, learning every facet of the market, identifying opportunities others missed, seeing potential where others saw only decay. The searing pain of my past became the relentless fuel for my ambition. I worked ceaselessly, sleeping little, driven by a singular vision of not just financial independence, but of a quiet, unassailable power that no one could ever take from me again. Vivienne's actions had taught me a brutal, unforgettable lesson. Never depend on anyone and always have a contingency, a hidden ace up your sleeve. My company, Arbor Estates, grew from a small, audacious startup into a formidable force in the luxury real estate development and investment sector. I became widely known for my strategic foresight, my uncanny ability to transform neglected, undervalued properties into thriving, desirable assets. But beneath this outward professional success beat another, deeper, more personal motivation. Years before my father's death, as a curious teenager exploring our family history, I had stumbled upon something truly extraordinary while helping him catalog some new acquisitions for his beloved collection. Amongst his detailed, sprawling notes on the Renaissance pieces, I found an old, faded letter tucked so carefully into the back of a canvas. It wasn't about the art itself, but about its profound provenance, detailing the original owner, a forgotten relative, and a peculiar, almost unbelievable clause tied irrevocably to its future. My father, with his meticulous nature and love for hidden histories, had even included a faint, almost invisible mark on the frame of one specific painting, a small, subtle symbol known only to him and me. This discovery had thrilled us both. We had spent hours researching, uncovering a secret that would undoubtedly shock the art world, a secret I eventually corroborated through meticulous, private investigation over the years, using every resource my growing empire could provide. This was my hidden weapon, my ultimate trump card. This wasn't just about the money Vivienne had stolen. It was profoundly about the art, about my father's precious legacy, and the deep, emotional connection I had to it. I knew with absolute certainty that Vivienne had no idea of its true significance beyond its perceived market value. She saw it as a mere status symbol, another feather in her cap, something to flaunt. I, on the other hand, saw it as a sacred thread connecting me to my past, and eventually, a powerful tool for my future, for the justice I sought. I never spoke of the secret, never hinted at it, never gave her even the slightest reason to suspect. I simply waited, building my empire piece by piece, knowing with unwavering certainty that one day, Vivienne's insatiable greed would inevitably lead her to a precipice, and I would be there, waiting calmly, to ensure she fell. The call came almost a year ago, not directly from Vivienne, of course. Her inflated pride would never allow for such a direct plea. It came from her increasingly frazzled financial advisor, a man clearly at his wit's end, hinting vaguely at liquidity issues and pressing deadlines. I feigned polite surprise, expressing only mild, professional concern. My company was, by then, a known entity respected across the industry for its absolute discretion and its unparalleled ability to execute complex, high-stakes property deals. Vivienne's properties, particularly the grand estate she had inherited from my father, were immense. Their astronomical maintenance costs, coupled with her unchecked, extravagant spending, had finally begun to weigh her down, slowly but surely dragging her into the quagmire of debt. I allowed her to squirm. I let her make desperate, indirect overtures, orchestrating through a series of intermediaries what she needed to believe was a negotiation of equals. My team, operating under my careful, precise direction, began to circle her properties like silent, predatory vultures, not with aggression, but with quiet, professional efficiency. We initiated discussions about potential acquisitions in the very district where her largest holdings lay, sowing seeds of hope and desperation simultaneously. My acquisition team, entirely unaware of my personal, deeply rooted connection to Vivienne, was genuinely excited about the prospects. The properties were prime, but disastrously overleveraged. This was precisely the kind of complex, high-value project Arbor Estates specialized in and excelled at. When Vivienne finally had to swallow her pride and arrange a direct meeting, I was more than ready. She arrived at my sleek corporate office, dressed impeccably, a forced, brittle smile plastered on her face, but her eyes, despite her efforts, betrayed a faint, telltale tremor of desperation. She spoke in vague, evasive terms about restructuring assets and optimizing portfolios, never once admitting the true extent of her catastrophic financial peril. My response was meticulously calm, measured. I listened intently, offering only non-committal murmurs and thoughtful, calculated pauses. I presented myself as a purely pragmatic businesswoman, interested only in sound, profitable investments, devoid of emotion. I didn't gloat, I didn't accuse, I didn't even raise my voice. I simply outlined our rigorous due diligence process, the inevitable, painstaking valuations, and the cold, hard, inescapable numbers. This controlled demeanor, this utter lack of emotional reaction, was precisely what she catastrophically mistook for weakness. She interpreted my calm as either a lack of genuine interest or, worse, my secret pleasure in her predicament, but never, not for a moment, as part of a calculated, precise strategy. She truly believed I was still the same vulnerable, heartbroken girl she had so cruelly cast out years ago, perhaps even hoping for a handout, a small act of charity. Her arrogance, instead of being tempered by her dire plight, seemed only to grow, blossoming like a poisonous flower. She began to drop subtle, self-important hints of her connections and her unassailable position in society, trying desperately to impress or intimidate me, completely unaware that she was speaking directly to the architect of her impending, spectacular ruin. She even mentioned, almost casually, with a dismissive wave of her hand, that the art collection was among the assets that might need to be liquidated to cover her mounting debts. Her tone implied that this was merely a minor inconvenience, a trifle to be disposed of, nothing of true consequence. It was then that a quiet, knowing smile played briefly on my lips, entirely unnoticed by her. The trap was meticulously set. My team, meticulously following my instructions to the letter, presented a non-binding offer for some of her properties, but conspicuously excluded the main estate and, crucially, the magnificent art collection. This was by precise design. It left her with just enough dwindling hope to desperately cling to, but not nearly enough to actually solve her overwhelming problems. It forced her hand further, pushing her relentlessly towards her self-destruction. She needed the crown jewels, the primary estate, and the art collection to truly escape the financial abyss she found herself in. As the deadlines for her voluminous loans loomed ever closer, she became increasingly frantic, demanding my company reconsider our offer, pushing for the inclusion of her most valuable assets. I remained impassive, unwavering, stating our strict investment criteria and the unfavorable current market conditions for certain assets. I allowed her to believe she was still driving the bus, still in control, even as I quietly, subtly steered her directly into the path of a speeding freight train. The day of the auction arrived, an event Vivienne herself had orchestrated as a desperate, final-ditch effort to offload the main estate and the art collection to a private buyer, desperately hoping to avoid a formal, public foreclosure that would shatter her carefully crafted image. She had managed to gather a small, exclusive group of potential high-net-worth buyers, esteemed art dealers, and, of course, her beleaguered bankers and lawyers, all assembled in the very ballroom where she had given her misguided triumph speech just weeks before. I was there, an invited guest, as part of a consortium of potential buyers that my real estate firm represented. Vivienne, still clinging to a rapidly fraying thread of dignity, greeted me with a brittle, forced smile, whispering, "Still no interest in my finest assets, Kaelen, darling? A shame. But I suppose some opportunities are simply too grand for some people." Her implication was crystal clear. I wasn't playing in her league. I wasn't worthy of such treasures. The professional auctioneer began the proceedings, moving with practiced ease through less significant pieces before inevitably arriving at the star attractions, the coveted Renaissance collection, followed by the grand estate itself. Vivienne stood proudly beside the auctioneer, beaming, ready to announce the sale that she believed would miraculously save her. The bid started to climb, slowly at first, then gaining a steady, relentless momentum. My team, following my specific, precise instructions, made only a few low, exploratory bids on other, minor items, just enough to seem genuinely interested, but never, not once, on the main art pieces or the estate itself. Then, just as the bidding for the largest, most valuable painting, the one with the faint, invisible mark my father had shown me so many years ago, reached a critical, fever pitch, I stepped forward. The auctioneer paused, sensing the sudden, profound shift in the room's energy, every eye turning towards me. Vivienne looked at me, a flicker of annoyance, then bewilderment, in her eyes. "Kaelen, dear, do you have a question?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension, a patronizing smirk on her face. I walked slowly towards the front, my footsteps echoing in the hushed, suddenly silent room. My voice was calm, clear, and projected with an inherent authority that instantly commanded everyone's complete attention. "Indeed, Vivienne. I have more than a question. I have a revelation." A ripple of murmurs, a collective intake of breath, went through the entire room. Vivienne's smile faltered, her face beginning to pale. "What are you talking about?" she hissed, her eyes narrowing, a hint of genuine dread beginning to creep into them. I turned slowly to face the assembled art experts and potential buyers, my gaze sweeping across their expectant faces. "Ladies and gentlemen, this magnificent collection, particularly this painting right here," I gestured gracefully to the large, imposing canvas, "is indeed a marvel. Its documented provenance suggests it passed through the hands of European nobility before landing with my late father. However, what Vivienne doesn't know, and what I do, is a crucial, hidden piece of its true history." I paused for effect, allowing the suspense to build, watching Vivienne's face contort into a mask of utter confusion and rapidly growing dread. "This specific painting," I continued, my voice unwavering, "contains a profound secret. A secret known only to my father and me, a hidden compartment, skillfully integrated into the frame during a restoration many decades ago. Not for treasure, not for jewels, but for a document, a piece of written history." I approached the painting, drawing closer, then gracefully reached behind the framed canvas to a specific, almost invisible spot, pressing firmly. There was a faint, almost imperceptible click, and a small, perfectly concealed panel popped open. From within, I carefully extracted a parchment, brittle with age, its edges frayed, but its script still legible. "This," I declared, holding it aloft for all to see, for every eye to witness, "is a codicil to the original will of my great-great-grandfather, signed and witnessed, predating my father's acquisition of the painting itself by decades. It states, unequivocally, that this entire collection, specifically bequeathed to his firstborn granddaughter of the direct paternal line, shall never be sold. Instead, it is stipulated to be held in trust, to be inherited by that granddaughter and her direct descendants, should she, or they, ever reclaim it and demonstrate irrefutable proof of lineage. Should it ever be put up for public sale or fall into the hands of someone outside the direct bloodline, the entire collection, along with the very estate it resides in, legally reverts, immediately and irrevocably, to a charitable foundation dedicated to supporting art education for underprivileged youth." My father, in his meticulous way, knew this. He purchased this painting specifically to protect this clause, knowing it was the only way to ensure the collection's true purpose and intent would be known, should it ever be threatened by greed or exploitation. I then looked directly at Vivienne, my eyes locking with hers, a ghost of a triumphant smile playing on my lips. And as my father's only surviving child, and his direct paternal line descendant, I am that granddaughter. The faint mark he placed on the frame, the one he showed me when I was a child, was our private confirmation, a cherished family secret that now, in this very moment, becomes a public, undeniable truth. The room erupted into a deafening cacophony of murmurs, gasps, and frantic whispers. Vivienne stood utterly frozen, her face completely drained of all color, her jaw hanging open in disbelief, her eyes wide with dawning horror. "No," she croaked, her voice barely a whisper. "That's impossible. It's mine. It's all legally mine." "It never truly was, Vivienne," I said, my voice cutting through her desperate denial, calm and resolute. "Not truly. You merely held it in trust, unknowingly. And now, by attempting to sell it, by putting it up for public auction, you have triggered the very clause designed to prevent its commercial exploitation. This entire collection, and by legal extension due to a further clause in my father's will that tied the art to the estate if the codicil was ever enacted, is no longer yours. It belongs, as of this very moment, to the Art for All Foundation, effective immediately. Your carefully planned sale, Vivienne, has just become a donation, orchestrated by your very own hand, a final, fitting irony." The bankers, their faces ashen with shock, started whispering frantically among themselves, their hopes of recouping their substantial loans evaporating before their very eyes, turning to dust. Vivienne, the self-proclaimed queen of her crumbling empire, had just overseen its final, spectacular, and utterly devastating collapse. The aftermath was pure pandemonium. Vivienne, her face a grotesque mask of shock and unadulterated fury, let out a guttural sound, a strangled cry of disbelief and impotent rage. "You scheming bitch," she shrieked, lunging towards me, but her lawyers, their faces grim, swiftly intercepted her, holding her back from physical assault. Her carefully constructed facade shattered into a million pieces, revealing the raw, ugly desperation and unbridled greed beneath. She began raving hysterically, accusing me of fraud, of manipulation, of every deceit imaginable, but her wild, baseless words held no weight, no power, against the undeniable evidence of the codicil and the visible, tangible proof of the hidden compartment. The art experts, initially skeptical, were now poring over the brittle parchment, their expressions shifting from intense curiosity to awe, and then to a dawning, profound realization of the magnitude of what had just transpired, a revelation that would send shockwaves through the art world. The bankers who had arrived hoping to salvage their vast investments were now locked in hushed, furious conversations with Vivienne's rapidly unraveling legal team. I could hear snippets of their panicked whispers, unprecedented, complete forfeiture, no collateral left, she's utterly ruined. Their faces were a mixture of profound shock and deep, agonizing regret, not for Vivienne's fate, but for their own catastrophic misjudgment in backing her. They had implicitly believed her grandiose claims of unassailable assets, never for a second imagining that such an intricate, decades-old trap lay hidden within the very heart of her supposed wealth. Vivienne herself spiraled into a complete, horrifying breakdown. Tears streamed down her face, not tears of sorrow or remorse, but of pure, unadulterated rage and frustrated, thwarted greed. She pointed a trembling, accusatory finger directly at me, her voice hoarse, accusing me of deliberately ruining her. "You planned this. All these years. You waited. I simply allowed your own actions to determine your fate, Vivienne," I replied, my voice steady, betraying not a flicker of emotion. "Your avarice led you here, to this very moment. You chose to disregard family, history, and the subtle whispers of truth that were always present. I merely ensured that when the time was right, the truth, the real truth, would finally be heard and justice served. There was a collective intake of breath from the sparse, stunned audience. My composure remained utterly unshakable, a stark contrast to Vivienne's hysterical, public breakdown. Some of the attendees, who had probably heard snippets of the family drama over the years, now looked at me with a newfound respect, a quiet admiration, and at Vivienne with undisguised pity, which quickly turned to open disdain as her ugly. Desperate accusations continued to echo in the ballroom. Her elaborate life of luxury, built painstakingly on a foundation of deceit and stolen inheritance, had just been completely, irrevocably dismantled. The estate, the art, her very identity as a woman of means, all of it was gone, vanished in a puff of smoke, leaving her with nothing but debts. The property, no longer hers to sell, could not even serve as collateral for her mounting, astronomical debts. She was utterly, financially ruined, left with nothing. I watched her, not with malice, not with sadistic glee, but with a detached, complete sense of accomplishment. There was no true joy in her suffering, only the quiet, profound satisfaction of justice meticulously served. The house that she had so cruelly evicted me from, the place of my childhood memories, would now serve a higher purpose, its grand walls echoing with the laughter and creativity of children learning about art, rather than the hollow boasts and manipulative schemes of a woman obsessed solely with material possessions. It was a perfectly poetic, deeply satisfying end to her destructive reign. Months have passed since that day. The opulent ballroom, once the scene of Vivienne's ill-fated triumph, now bustles with the vibrant, joyful energy of children. The grand estate has been successfully transitioned into the Art for All Foundation, a thriving educational center where budding artists learn, create, and find inspiration from the very collection that once held Vivienne's fraudulent claim. I personally oversee its development, ensuring that my father's true legacy and the noble intent of my great-great-grandfather are honored in every possible way. The art is now truly seen, appreciated for its profound history, its enduring beauty, and its profound ability to inspire, rather than merely its fleeting market value. My company, Arbor Estates, has continued its upward trajectory, soaring to new heights of success. The public revelation of the art's true history and my integral role in bringing it to light paradoxically enhanced my reputation even further. I became known not just as a sharp, formidable businesswoman, but as someone with integrity, someone who understood the deeper, intrinsic value of heritage and purpose beyond mere profit. We have since acquired other magnificent properties that align perfectly with our Special Projects initiative, focusing on developments and restorations that contribute positively, meaningfully, to the community, not just our bottom line. As for Vivienne, her lavish, illusory life vanished as quickly and completely as it had appeared. She was forced to sell off her remaining, less significant assets to cover exorbitant legal fees and a mere fraction of her devastating debts. The last I heard, she moved to a small, unassuming apartment in a less fashionable part of the city, largely forgotten and unpersoned by the glittering social circles she once so desperately dominated. Her arrogance, her manipulative charm, her carefully cultivated allure, all of it was utterly useless without wealth to back them up, without something to gain. She is no longer my problem, nor even a passing thought in my mind. Looking back, the journey from a heartbroken, unjustly evicted young woman to a successful entrepreneur wielding a carefully guarded secret was long, arduous, and immensely challenging. But it was also incredibly enlightening, profoundly transformative. I learned that true power isn't about controlling others or the fleeting accumulation of material possessions that can be taken away. It's about self-mastery, about cultivating unwavering patience, and about the quiet, unassailable strength of knowing your own truth, your own worth. It's about building something meaningful, something lasting, not just for yourself, but for others, for a greater purpose. Vivienne believed she had stripped me of everything, left me with nothing, but in reality, she liberated me. She forced me to forge my own path, to discover my own profound strength, and to cultivate a resilience that ultimately became her complete and utter undoing. The revenge, as they say, was indeed sweet, but it wasn't born of malice alone, not purely. It was the sweet taste of justice, of reclaiming what was rightfully ours, and of witnessing the profound, undeniable truth that sometimes the greatest acts of empowerment unfold in silence, patiently waiting for the precise moment when the universe aligns to reveal the ultimate, undeniable lesson. True wealth lies not in what you possess, but in the integrity, the purpose, and the indomitable spirit with which you choose to live your life.